Well, it's no secret that I'm a big fan of the Purple Group. We bought the shares probably 2 years ago at around 80 cents in our model portfolio. It went all the way to £3.50, and they've come all the way back again, just above the level of purchase that BizNews went into them at. That's perhaps because the real story is not yet known. We'll find out from Rish Tandapany, who's the Chief Operating Officer of the Purple Group, what's been happening of late. Rish, good to be talking with you this morning. I've had many conversations with your colleague and the founder of the Purple Group, Charles Savage. And over the past year, I guess, much of this has been dominated by, first of all, the operation in Asia, which you didn't disclose who it was, then the disclosure of the partnership with the GCash group. Now, maybe for those who haven't been following the Purple story that closely, you can just recap for us why you went to the Philippines and who GCash is.
100%. Thanks for having me, Alec. Interesting story. I think Purple reached a stage nearly 2 years ago where they realized that globalizing the group was of paramount importance. Just because they realized that there was an opportunity set outside of South Africa with similar socio-demographic, socio-economic trends where our products, EasyEquities in particular, could be leveraged. And after doing a kind of extensive research on that, we realized that Southeast Asia had the most amount of synergies with what we were currently experiencing in South Africa. And that's from a wealth gap perspective. I think it's from an education perspective, etc. And we embarked on the Filipinos journey, partially through chance, kind of a few chance emails that went between Charles and the head of GCash in terms of leveraging each other's technology and each other's stack and pushing through that wealth management product. But also because Purple realized as a group that we needed to globalize our operation. Where were we going to get scalability, stability? Where were we going to cater for a global client set from? So we did, again, more due diligence in the Philippines. I think both the employer opportunity set, competency set there was fantastic. And we kind of jumped 2 feet into the deep end on this. I joined roughly 18 months ago. And interestingly enough, I'm one of the more senior managers in Purple Group, but I'm the only one outside of South Africa. And I think that was pretty telling in terms of where the company wanted to take its product, where it wanted to grow its client set. The reason GCash, I guess, is pivotal for us was, they are the big name in the Philippines. Philippines and most Southeast Asian countries are somewhat different in that they don't necessarily have the diversity in terms of retail offerings, in terms of the wallet mentality as well. If you go to the Philippines back 4 years, there was a kind of equal playing field among some of the retail banks and among some of the mobile wallets. But during the pandemic, GCash took over. And one of the reasons for that is their ability to commit to the customer and the customer experience. Their technology is fantastic. And they became a pervasive technology offering within everyone's day-to-day life. So imagine an instance where you get up in the morning and you take the bus to work, or you have to put petrol in your car, you have to pay your kids' school fees, you get the opportunity to invest, you get the opportunity to pay for your 7-Eleven, whatever it is, all can be done on GCash. And there's very few countries in the world that have that seamless experience through one application or one super app. And when we got discussing with them, you could see that they had gaps in their tech stack, which we would be able to fill, and vice versa. They offered an opportunity and an entry into the Southeast Asian market that we were looking for. So I think it's a similar relationship. I think we both have learned a lot from each other. It's taken the amount of time it's taken just because we've had to navigate relative regulatory hurdles, one, but also to make sure that we understand the client set that we're getting involved in. We're very South African at Purple Group. And I think the first 3 to 6 months of this whole exercise was actually a cultural integration exercise, making sure that we understood the population, 120 million strong in the Philippines, 50 million of whom are Gen Z, slightly different to what we're used to kind of accommodating. And I think that exercise proved beneficial. We took our findings further to the regulator, further to our clients as well, and happy to say that we're on the road to a positive launch soon.
Philippines is known as being quite close to the United States. So you'd presume that US shares would be appealing to the population there. Is there any competitor who offers easy access to Wall Street at the moment?
Yeah, it's a good question. There are competitors. However, they're operating, within the opaque regulatory environment that does exist in some Southeast Asian countries. And again, when it comes to the Philippines, a lot of their concerns revolve around two predominant factors. One, capital flight. Are technologies and competitors encouraging capital flight? And the second is whether that customer service and customer-centric environment, which they've built and pioneered really in the Philippines, stays within the Philippines. And I think EasyEquities, in our journey with GCash, managed to answer those two questions. Now, it's interesting you mentioned the US. I mean, if you walk down the average street in Manila or some of the surrounding towns, you see huge amounts of US impact and US kind of cultural influence. There's still huge amount of US air bases still in the country. And they do things in an American way here. If you look at their approach to social media, it's much more Americanized than it would be, say, kind of Western European or African. And we've tried to learn from that. We've tried to leverage from that. I think it's been a shame that they haven't accelerated that journey. They haven't leveraged from that themselves and kind of driven the kind of US agenda and US investment agenda more robustly in the Philippines. And I think that's why GCash and us coming together has proved a kind of uncomparable team, because we bring that regulatory know-how from South Africa. GCash brings the distribution, and I think we've been able to kind of solve that to an extent. I think the other important thing to mention is we're operating in an infrastructure where the regulator themselves are constantly learning and constantly getting their feet in the right places with regards to how to approach new products, whether it's blockchain, AI, fractional shares, etc. And as opposed to bullishly going in and kind of telling people how to do things, we've adopted a much more educational approach this time around. And I think that's important because it becomes a much more collaborative, educational, knowledge-sharing exercise. And we've learned just as much from the regulators, who essentially are leveraging off existing US regulations. I mean, we've taken that, modernized it, or helped them modernize it, and worked with GCash on offering that, whilst American in nature, yes, I'd say to some extent, definitely globally accessible. And I think that's another important point. I mean, GCash, whilst being a pioneering Filipino company, do have global ambitions. And that's another synergy with EasyEquities that we've been able to push forward.
How big is GCash? How many users do they have?
Well, I think they're topping up around 70 million day-to-day users at the moment. And that's 70 million out of a population of about 119 million Filipinos at the moment. I mean, I hate to actually give people the numbers when it comes to GCash because, depending on where you are in the world, 70 million either sounds huge or it sounds a little amount if you're looking to the Indias or China. But one thing I will say is, when I first kind of landed in the Philippines last June, the pervasiveness and how much GCash permeates every level of society, whether you're taking a taxi, whether you're paying a bill, it's in your face, it's front and center, it's everywhere. And as opposed to an environment where you kind of think of a world or an option other than GCash, in the Philippines, your go-to point is GCash. You wouldn't really transfer money to someone else through another means. It's become synonymous with the Philippines. It's become synonymous with technology and in particular the telecommunications arm, because GCash is owned by Globe. So it's everywhere. And again, GCash part of the kind of wider Ant group as well. So obviously you have the kind of stable infrastructure and the technology stack behind Ant as well. So hugely dominating figure in the Philippines market.
Are you looking then to bring to the Filipinos a similar situation to South Africa where you can buy shares literally for 10 or 20 rand, i.e. that they can, the money they might have over in their wallets at the end of the month could then be channeled into Apple shares or whatever they might pick their fancy?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've looked at kind of what drives the average Filipino, and generally within Asia, there's a mentality of investment, but more probably aligned to family investments, properties, things like that. But we're seeing within the kind of new emerging Gen Z and kind of late millennial population, that there is an interest of people actually looking at their bank balance every month and saying, well, I've got this much left. Where could I forward invest that? And it's an interesting concept in the Philippines, because actually Filipinos get paid twice a month. They don't work on a monthly payroll cycle. So there's two opportunities, two, bites of the cherry on this. And we've tried to educate them to actually say, well, instead of making kind of varied, overly diverse choices with regards to how you save that money, look at where is the cheapest option of actually spending and saving, helping you save that money. And I think that's where EasyEquities can be powerful, because the minimums that you just explained in South Africa are very relevant in the Philippines. When we've done use cases and kind of focus groups with our target market, 50 peso, which is kind of around the 15 rand mark, is a very, investable amount for an average Filipino. And if you add that over a chain of months, chain of events, I think you do develop that kind of investment portfolio across Filipinos. I think the other big thing in the Philippines is, why are they investing? Are they investing purely for savings reasons, so longevity, retirement, things like that? Or is there that feeling of, FOMO and, fear of missing out on the next big thing? And that's a prevalent thing in Southeast Asia, but in the Philippines in particular. People like the idea that groupthink is quite powerful. And so, and in the same way GCash have got huge amounts of market share and traction, we're hoping that once we start that investment bandwagon, we're actually going to get a lot of people who join that purely because others are doing it. And one of the big aspects of this, and one of the reasons we aggressively took an aggressive stance in Q2 of this year by launching our own game with GCash, was to actually see how people approach their investment experience. Are they copy-pasting other people's trades? Is it a very gamified experience? Or are they actually more into the fundamentals? And we've seen a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the results of that. But it's very much orientating towards, once someone else has taken part in this process, their brother, their sister, their family, their friends, their clans of people want to be involved in that. And I think that's going to be a big organic marketing drive for EasyEquities and GCash, just allowing people visibility on a product that they don't want to miss out on, regardless of whether it's 15 pesos, 20 pesos, 1,000 pesos. And I think that's going to be an interesting take on this.
So before we move off there and have a look at your progress in South Africa, where are you as far as launch date is concerned? And you spoke about the game. How many people signed up?
So we've progressed the game for 6 weeks now, just short of 6 weeks, and we've got 150,000 registered users. That's 150,000, bang on the target we expected. The demographics interesting as well. The majority of users are between the 25 and 30 age range, very similar to what we're seeing trending in South Africa. But we've also got a huge campus game population. So a lot of people in the universities, a lot of people in the kind of high schools as well, trying their bit at playing the game. And I think that's insightful for us. We're actually extending the game for another 2 weeks for a couple of reasons. One is to continue the traction that we've got in developing that user base that eventually we can convert into a live product. But secondly, because we're constantly in interaction with both GCash and the regulator, and essentially providing a sandbox environment of how can we extrapolate findings, trends, future kind of marketing tactics on the back of that data. My personal target on this is to hit 200,000. I think we'd have a good sample set then to kind of extrapolate more findings, and then we'll take it into the live product. We're ready to go live. We've got a managed products offering, which we call Bundles in South Africa, which we're just finalizing the terms of a roadmap to launch, hopefully within the next kind of couple of months, hopefully within the next month at least. And then again, it gives Filipinos a different take on the investment experience, a select amount of managed portfolios which they can kind of align themselves to or commit their investment strategies to. And then hopefully, as we continue to work with the regulators, we get to a point where we can pretty much have an all-inclusive offering for all our products on EasyEquities in South Africa, in the Philippines. And like I said, we're not rushing that journey. I think it's as much education and making sure that we've built the robustness in our infrastructure and in our staff in the Philippines. We've now developed an office of 40 plus individuals in the Philippines. That's very much to show both the regulator and the Asian market that we're ready to cater for whatever they throw at us. So we've got compliance personnel, we've got customer service, we've got a very big tech offering here. And the aim is to actually kind of collaborate long-term with the likes of GCash and the regulator to bring all the innovative products that we're pushing on the South African set all the way through to Asia.
Are you spending a lot of time there?
Yeah, mine, as I mentioned at the beginning, is an interesting role. When Charles offered me the role, it was very much on the idea that I would kind of be the kind of global face of the company in terms of being the one traveling around, pushing products, pushing some of the more operational sides of the business. I spend about, I'd say, 10 days a month in Manila. I'm actually based out of Singapore, which is fine by me because, honestly speaking, as much as I've worked with Filipinos and people in the Southeast Asian area for the best part of 12 years now, you're constantly learning. And, you know, I'm at an age now where I'm learning as much about social media, gamification, AI, those type of things, that I need to be on the ground in Manila more often. That's where I kind of get my bread and butter information. It's where I get to feed more information back to the regulators. I'm enjoying it. And another important thing and another distinction with South Africa is, I guess, the environment with which the sparsity and the environment with which the population operates. You know, Philippines is very much an island nation. It's both disconnected and massively connected at the same time. And the connection comes through the likes of GCash, who've managed to create this huge mobile wallet. But the disconnection and kind of the unbanked population is still relatively large. And unless you spend some time here going to the islands, going to the provinces, finding out how you can help those types of individuals on their investment journey, you're really not going to maximize myself as a COO or EasyEquities as a company. So it's been both humbling and rewarding, and I'm glad I've taken the opportunity.
What were you doing before you joined the Purple Group 18 months ago?
Yeah, so I was very much an investment banker. My previous role before Purple was for the Abu Dhabi Sovereign Wealth Fund. And I think it comes with a lot of advantages. I got to see the way big systems, infrastructures operate, especially when you talk about Purple Group and EasyEquities kind of scaling towards the 50 million, 100 million, 1 billion, hopefully, client number. And before that, I was in investment banking in London as well, and very much all from an operational experience. And the reason Philippines resonated with me quite well, even though I live in Singapore, was there's a very customer-centric, operational-centric view of working life in Asia. And just to give you an example, if you look, 30% of the world's call centers still currently sit within the Philippines. They're taking over a huge amount of the kind of IT outsourcing industry. And so my experience kind of felt like a massively positive pairing and something I could relate to when I joined Purple. And the aim of the group is to develop a 24/7 operation out of the Philippines that both services not only South Africa, the Philippines, but the wider global reach that we're aiming for. And to be fair, we found the competency. We found that time zone's a huge advantage for us here. And obviously, about our Australia offering as well. That's something obviously that we can leverage off being in the Philippines as well.
And when you have a look back at what's happening in South Africa, are there products that are going to obvious that could make the travel or the transition over to being plugged into GCash in time? And I'm thinking here particularly of something like Easy Credit or even Easy Properties that we see is also doing very well.
Interesting you mentioned this. I mean, I recall a conversation I had with Charles last November, and him and I have always had an understanding that South Africa essentially would act as our product factory. That's where a majority of our intellectual capital sits. And we develop those products in a way that they become robust, scalable, proven in South Africa, and then we would outsource them to the rest of the world. And when I look at how relatable that is to the Philippines, it's interesting and scary at the same time how much mirroring of socioeconomic opportunity, product opportunity that there is. And you mentioned Easy Credit, Easy Properties. I had a conversation yesterday with someone relatively senior in the kind of property space in the Philippines, and Asia has always been, and you're kind of growing up from a kind of in an Asian Indian way. Property's always been your first to kind of port of call when it comes to investments. I remember my parents always telling me, as soon as I got my first salary, think about putting a deposit on a property, things like that. And it still holds true massively, whether in Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, India, 100% holds true in this part of the world. And one of the things we've been working on here is navigating the regulatory landscape and specifically the rights around properties, and then bringing Easy Properties over from South Africa to here. And I think it'll be a huge opportunity here. And one of the benefits of the Philippines is, the diversity in terms of property and the diversity in terms of property expectations are quite vast. And I think the Easy Properties offering that Rupert has grown phenomenally in South Africa will do phenomenally here. And I think going back to the point I made about kind of an island nation, where there's different types of properties, different types of expectations around properties, I think there's a lot that we can leverage here. I mean, whenever I speak to anyone about properties, there's always a kind of a glint in their eye. And I'm positive in the sense that I think it could rival EasyEquities as a big product in Asia. On the Easy Credit side, look, the credit journey for an average Filipino is very different. I mean, credit cards in principle or in practice are not really used in Asia that much. Credit card usage, I think, is below 7% in the Philippines. And that's just, again, a cultural lack of affinity to kind of credit and credit cards. But that's replaced by a kind of awkward borrowing process where you borrow from friends and family, you take illegal means of credit, things like that. And the product that we're developing in South Africa, which you know very well, Easy Credit, I think has a role to play here. We're very cautious with Easy Credit in terms of not just seeing it as a credit product, but also seeing it as an affiliation to people's investment journeys. And I think that will resonate quite well in the Philippines. Educate people to a point where they have a portfolio and they're taking essentially a less risky approach in taking credit via that portfolio than through some of these more illegal, kind of dangerous means that they see in the Philippines. So those two products in particular resonate quite well. I think the other thing that I'm seeing kind of in direct kind of competition to some of the kind of Western countries in the world is there's a huge embedded finance movement going on here. And we're seeing partnerships in particular as the way forward in kind of growing both our presence as EasyEquities, but also just doing business anywhere else in Asia. And we're in kind of quite senior talks with a lot of the kind of big embedded high finance providers that we're meeting in the Philippines. And hopefully, like I said, we're not here to necessarily compete with everyone. We're actually here to partner and kind of leverage off some of their existing products. So in the tokenization space, in the AI space, things that Charles talked about before, I think we can do some good partnership deals and hopefully push those through as well.
Rish Tandapany is the Chief Operating Officer at the Purple Group, and I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.